single family homes, single family rentals, it's made up a larger portion, especially since of the rental stock since the great financial crisis, 2008. And most of the listeners know that multifamily rents have, last year were mostly negative, and, we're just struggling to stay positive in 2024. Single family rentals are telling a different story. What does this John Burns research and consulting piece, they're very proud of the data, break it down for us. What's going on in the single family rental market?
Yeah, I think that it's showing a lot more stability. I think the highs weren't quite as high as the multifamily rents got to, but the lows aren't nearly as low. And I bet if you evened it all out, they're doing maybe a little bit better, of all things considered, post-pandemic, these past 4 years, than apartments. I think that is, well, it could be due to millennials reaching like a different life stage. And that's why I kind of paired this John Burns Research and Consulting, this recent article on single family rental trends with an earlier article that they wrote about birth rates. And they paired it with the idea of, what is it, move up housing, or like you're moving in from a smaller like starter home to a larger house. And that's what they link this birth rate. But I think I'm kind of continuing a conversation. You mentioned it a couple weeks ago when we covered that first one, was what about single family rentals? Because if we're talking about life stages, and one of the big life stages is either having kids or getting old enough where maybe you don't want to share a wall with anyone, whether it's a detached home or not. Even if it's a townhome, you want a little bit more privacy maybe, and you want more space. You maybe have a little bit more money. And,
the American dream.
Yeah, the American dream. Well, you can rent the American dream as much as buy it, maybe. And I like, if is it to own a home or is it to live in a home?
Yeah, well, and I don't think that that's really a choice anymore for a lot of folks who were at that stage in life, who were saying, I'm going to make that transition. I want to live in a house. Again, whether they just want a little more privacy, they want a garden, they've got dog, or they have kids, which is the traditional factor. But that's not an option for a lot of folks because of how expensive mortgages are, interest rates. And
that's like making this link between life stages and housing. It is worth acknowledging. Yeah, for millions of people, they just can't even make that. That decision, whether it's for because of affordability, which is huge, or they just maybe they live somewhere where they can do it.
Well, and there's flexibility also. I think there's a preference to say, I don't want to lock myself in. I maybe want to move. Maybe I want to, switch careers. Maybe, we're living in a larger city and we're going to move somewhere else. But we don't want to lock ourselves in right now. But again, then also there's just the cost between interest rates, but also it's not like we've seen single family home prices come down. They've continued to increase. So it's becoming more just further of a reach for so many folks that are kind of at that stage in life. So it's not surprising to see that the rents in single family rentals are elevated and are actually at above average rent growth levels, where we're not seeing that in the multifamily industry.
And that's really, taken together, I would expect. It seems like there are a lot of people. The demand is here. The demand is here for single family homes in general, whether it's buying or renting. And if you can't buy it, and this interest rates is a huge kicker. Sure, it's home prices, but home costs are huge. And we'll see in this NAR report that affordability has, it kind of almost improved, but then it's gone back down because, regardless of how sluggish home price growth is, the mortgage costs have been so high that it's just preventing people from getting ahead, from being able to make that first home purchase, period. But that being said, with this in mind, I do think that in your 20s, you're most likely to be an apartment renter. However, you're seeing this influx of millennials maybe that want to move out to suburbs, maybe rent a house. I don't think that in this article specifically, now it showed the 3.6 rent growth and it showed the stability throughout the pandemic. But I don't know. I'm curious about build to rent as a discrete segment from single family rentals. I've heard more shakier things about maybe build to rent properties being pieced out and turned into less of a single plot of land and more of piecemeal single part or single family home.
The lines are definitely blurred. I think in the BTR space. I mean, you get kind of some townhomes or again scattered site. And BTR, build to rent, is definitely all the rage. It makes sense. I think home builders are exploring it. Saying, hey, if we can just unload 20 of these, 30, 40 of these properties, houses at one time to one buyer for a similar price, rather than selling them to end users, Now, the reality is, though, an operator of BTR is going to want to get a little bit better price than someone who's buying it, to actually live in,
Yeah.
Theoretically. But but at the same time, there's such a demand for that type of product that you can achieve some really high rent levels, relative to, multifamily, because you're getting the amenities of it being your own space, which is hard to discount.
I'm just wondering what the mechanism is for maybe a owner of build to rent, that they're not, if things aren't going well, is there a way to let one go? Now you don't have 20 in one site, you got 19, and that one's just going to be sold to an individual.
Yeah.
Or if there's some kind of HOA thing where if you're managing all these, then that person has got to contribute.
Well, and thinking about selling the BTR development, if you own 50 single-family rentals in a little neighborhood, you sell off one or two, how are you going to sell those eventually? How are you going to sell the whole development? Are you going to sell it as a BTR with, except with the exception of one or two?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it could, basically doing almost a condo conversion or apartment to condos, where you're basically taking rentals and then selling them to the end user. Again, theoretically you could get a higher price, and if there's a ton of demand for single family homes. So for example, if interest rates come down, and you bought that single family home for, let's call it $250,000 per unit, and then interest rates come down, you could sell it to another BTR operator for maybe $300,000 per house or whatever. Maybe that's pretty little cheaper than it'll actually go for. But then you might be able to sell it to an end user for $350 maybe.
You got to wait for 50 people to come line up.
Exactly. So again, you're getting a premium, but do you want to do 49 or 50 transactions, or do you want to do one transaction? And then the financing on all that's difficult too, because are you financing the entire site? Are you hit 50 different loans? Can you carve out all the different parcels? Has it been parceled out? And there's not one answer to any of that. So it's going to be interesting to see how this segment develops over the next decade or so. It's not going to get all figured out today, this year. But it is fascinating, and there's clearly a demand when we're looking at millennials, where they are in their stages of life, and then just kind of American culture, wanting to live in a house rather than in an apartment often, but not always the case. And again, it's not always an option for everybody, because you can't necessarily afford that amenity, which is your own four walls.
I totally agree. So whether it's life stages or what, this report says that single-family rentals have been, like I said before, well above the 3.6% historical average before the pandemic. I believe it's 3.9% now. I could be wrong here. Look, okay, it does look like it's 3.9% now. And this is a time in which apartment rental prices have been zero, sometimes negative. Prices for single-family rentals, again, above average post-pandemic, and their average rent seems to be a little bit higher than the average rent historically for apartments. Rent growth for single-family homes didn't get to the upper to mid-teens like it did for apartments. As you can see in this graph here, it peaked at 7.6 according to John Burns. Now, I looked at CoreLogic numbers, and CoreLogic suggests maybe single-family rent growth did grow that much. It has current rents at 3.2%, a little bit lower than the John Burns numbers, but their peak rent growth was 14% in early 2022. According to their chart, really has a big spike.